up the recording. So that was alarming. So we are recording this. If you want to watch it over and over and over again, it will be provided in about an hour or two after we finish up today. Or if you'd like to share pieces of it with your teams, go ahead. We have all of our older recordings are out on YouTube and on our channel if you're interested in checking some of those out. My name is Jill Stott, and welcome to Introduction to DevSecOps. My colleague here, Hira, she will be, I don't know, what do you want to do during this presentation, Hira? Do you want to monitor chat for me, laugh at my jokes, or just kind of sit by in case something happens to my connection?
All of the above.
You're the best. Okay, excellent. So again, if you'd like to just ask a question, since we have this small group, just go ahead and throw it out there. If you're more comfortable putting stuff in chat, I'm going to be watching that. I'm getting better at talking, clicking, and reading. All right, am I sharing my screen? I don't see the little green box around it. I'm almost paranoid.
Yes.
One time I was doing a training, I was talking for 10 minutes and showing all these slides. So I said, have you been showing something? No. And I had to start all over.
That's
all
their
right.
fault
So,
for letting you go 10 minutes. They should have got on you like that.
I said, like, why didn't somebody say something? Either they weren't paying attention at all, or they didn't want to be the one who called me out. I don't know. All right, so my name is Jill Stott, and welcome, Luke. And I'm a senior agile coach and trainer with Next Step Solutions. And just a little bit about me, I've been in IT for 23 years. Started when I was 7. That's why I'm so young. Also, I worked in 15 years in QA. Started as a manual tester, went into a lot of the automation, loved that, and then became an agile coach. And I do a lot of training as well in Kanban, a lot of Kanban classes, teach SAFe occasionally, DevOps and DevSecOps. I started teaching this DevOps Institute DevSecOps class a while back, and it really just opened my eyes and was so interesting. And I thought, oh, I'm going to do a free webinar to see if other people have this interest in at least understanding the landscape, what we should be worried about, and why. Again, just a tiny bit about Next Step Solutions. Obviously, we provide agile training. I see a couple familiar faces. You've been in some of our classes. We also provide agile coaching services. And we also have a portion, I don't know what it's called, they're called acceleration, where they actually do software development for companies at a pretty decent rate. So if you're interested in that, check out our website. Okay, so here is the story. Cybersecurity. Let me pull up my chat here. Okay, so you could probably guess what is the fastest growing type of crime in the US right now?
Is it cybercrime?
It is. Yes, so you don't need this class. Absolutely, it's cyber attacks are the fastest growing crime. And there was some study at the University of Maryland that say, hey, on a global scale, there's about an attack about every 39 seconds. So it's very, very rampant. We hear about the big ones, but a lot of them we don't hear about for various reasons. Some companies, they want to keep it on the DL. So even though we see 1 or 2 a year, or it's been a lot more lately, just know that there's so much more happening, not just for businesses, but individuals as well. So why does this matter? Lots of reasons why. So if suppose I owned a bank, and on average, if somebody went to my bank and physically robbed it, on average, the person would get about $7,000 money, which is still a hit, right? What do you think the average cost of a cyber attack is? Some guesses. You can plop it in chat or just shout it out.
More than 7,000, I'm guessing.
Greater than or equal to 7,000. Throw a guess out there.
300,000.
Would you say 300,000?
That was my guess.
Okay, good guess. $1 billion, also a good guess. According to IBM, they do a security report. It's really fascinating. If you go to their website, it's like a 20-page document about different statistics around data breaches. And they claim that the global average is 4.24 million. So there have been heists that did exceed $1 billion. And some of them are smaller, but this is again on average. Now you think, well, how does that even work? What are they stealing? So the cost, if you see here, I thought this was interesting because I always thought they were just directly stealing money, but the cost includes how much it took to actually detect the attack and then to escalate it and mitigate it, right? We're working overtime and probably pulling in some third parties to help us. That's expensive. Also, the notification, we've got to put out all these releases, make huge changes to our system, informing all our customers, oh my goodness, your data was just breached. And then our post-breach response, hey, if we realize we can't have this happen again, we're going to have to build up our cybersecurity. And then our lost business costs, of course, you know, whenever you hear like, oh, Target, all of your data was just stolen, Jill, your credit card number, I tend to not trust that company, and you're going to lose business when this happens. So even outside money, like physical money, there's a lot of other things that are at risk. So one, like I said, your reputation is at risk. The Target thing was like 5 years ago, and I still think about, oh, so glad I never got a Target credit card, even though they've solved it, right? It's all been mitigated. Also, our customers, not only vulnerable to losing customers, but our customers are vulnerable. If we have a breach in our system that they are using, not only will it hurt us, but it could potentially go out and infect their computers and make their lives miserable. Your secrets are in jeopardy of being stolen. Your corporate secrets, if you work for the government, lots of secrets that you don't want getting out to the wrong people. Also, your vulnerabilities are exposed. So as soon as you read in the newspaper where some corporation had a security breach, all the baddies out there say, oh, I just found somebody who's vulnerable, and they tend to get more attacks for that institution. So that could also increase the cost, because as you're trying to mitigate the damage from the original attack, then you're having to deal with these oncoming attacks. It can be a huge nightmare. And then a lot of the people are seeking not necessarily to steal your money, but just mess up your business for various reasons. You could have your operations come to a standstill if, for example, you get locked out of your systems that you own and you can't go into your job for weeks or months, or maybe just a portion that isn't working correctly, and you don't find out for 6 months in, and you're having a supreme amount of compromised service when that happens. I had to put this picture in, your health and your life. It is so stressful. And Hira mentioned, and I've had small security breaches personally, and it is so stressful to have that happen. And I have friends who had even bigger amounts of money that were stolen through cyber attacks, and it just rocks your world. It's just weird to have someone sneaking around looking at your stuff, and it takes a while to get back to some semblance of normalcy. All right, so story time. I mentioned at the beginning, for those of you who weren't here, that I used to work in QA. And when I started in QA, we went through a bunch of different frameworks, and then we landed on Scrum. So we were doing Scrum, and we were doing, I think, 6-month releases. So we were running these really short 2-week iterations, and we would have, here's our list of user stories. So I would take those, validate them, write my test cases, write my automated scripts, call that done. And then we were getting to the end of that 6 months release cycle. And then their security committee lived, I don't even know where they lived, honestly. They're this entity that then before we were able to release, they had to get our system and do a bunch of security scans on it. And we just dreaded it because it took so long, it was out of our control. And then basically we had to get on their wait list. So it's frustrating for the development team when you have a system like this where, hey, I'm doing very traditional security application and trying to back end or bolt it on at the end, trying to do agile. It just doesn't work very well. So we're just trying to scramble at the end. They hand you that huge report with thousands of different errors, and they say, oh, most of these are false, and we don't want to go through those. So they dump them off on the one QA person, Jill, who then has to line by line go through each one, not exactly knowing what I'm doing. I think it's good. So not a cool way to do that. And it's surprising how many big companies are still operating at least somewhat like this when it comes to security. So let's talk about some of the terminology: DevSecOps, DevOps, SecDevOps, so many weird words. See if I can get this to work here. All right, so Agile in 2001, they came out with the Agile Manifesto. Well, they said, okay, you know what, we've been doing this waterfall stuff, not working well. We have these people in these silos not talking to each other, just throwing information over the wall and hoping things work out. And that never did. Quality suffered, our lead times are extremely long, and it was very expensive to change. So with Agile, using frameworks like Scrum or methodology like Kanban, really bringing the business together with the development team, having them talk every single day. So they're not caught off guard and they're sharing ideas and very transparent. And then someone said, oh, you know, 2008, our good friend Patrick Dubois, he was tasked to do some stuff in the operations side as well as some development. And he realized, oh, you know what, I think we kind of left out our ops people. We deploy our product and we're just like, good luck. And they're supposed to maintain it. They're supposed to help customers install it and all this stuff. And they maybe didn't even know what features were being added. Maybe they have no familiarity with the product at all. Maybe they need certain backdoors to be applied so they can do their job. So that's kind of what brought the whole DevOps, the concept of, hey, let's take our dev and then pull our operations in closer, where they're actually in some of those planning meetings. They know what's coming down the pipeline. There's a shared responsibility that, hey, once we deploy it, the developers are also semi on the hook, working together more collaboratively. And then you think we would be smart by now and realize maybe there's other people we need to include, or at least bring closer together. Security being a big one, where, hey, you know, we were doing this DevOps, it's cool, but again, we're still trying to tack security on at the end, and it's just not working. It's not very agile, and we're finding we're not very secure. We have a lot of vulnerabilities. So someone said, well, let's bring security in. Let's take that whole concept shift left. Rather than having this huge effort at the end, why don't we start at the beginning when we're defining requirements and say, all right, let's bring our security expert in. Rather than having them just live in some siloed ivory tower, let's have them work with the team to educate the team, to start doing threat modeling when we have new features. What are some possible vulnerabilities? So when we design something, we're designing with that in mind, not trying to bake it in at the end. So there's a few, if you type in DevSecOps values, there's a couple people who took a stab at it. There's not, just like DevOps, it's very grassroots. There isn't one common doctrine like there is the Agile Manifesto for Agile. But I like this one that Larry Maturone has. If you go to devops.org, it has a lot of free information. So the concept is, hey, we value building security in rather than trying to bake it in at the end. We want to have empowered development teams who understand what it means to write secure code. They understand and care about security. It's just like quality. Remember, in the olden days, it was always QA's fault if quality was bad. And then we took a step back and said, hey, who's really responsible for quality? It's all of us. Same thing with security. We're all responsible, because if we have a breach, we're all going to feel the effects and damage the company and our reputation. We still want security specialists. They're hard to come by. They're expensive. It's a special skill set. We want to leverage them the best we can. We don't want them to be bogarting all of the information. So working more consistently with the team. And then I think this is an interesting, the idea of implement your features securely more than security features. So it's starting at the very beginning in the planning phase. Are you typing that code so it's secure? Let's scan it before we even put it in the build or try to do any CI. Then last one here, tools. Use tools as feedback for learning. So if I'm trying to validate my security right before I release, it's hard to pivot and change. Realize, you know what, the code we wrote is very vulnerable. It has a lot of gaps and holes, but we don't have time to rewrite it. So we're just going to put some band-aids on it. And we never really take that as a learning thing to the next iteration. So if we have smaller increments of security checks along the way, then it makes it a lot easier to learn and pivot. And a big part, just like in Agile and DevOps, culture is huge. So often, like people just, maybe in the development team, just don't care about security. They think it's a deterrent to their success to deliver quickly. But the idea is, rather than having all these policies we have to enforce, build a culture that understands the importance of it, and they take responsibility for security where they can, and they're willing to learn about it. Hey, maybe I don't understand this stuff. Well, I'm going to take some training, read some books, build up my skill set. That was cool. All right. Any questions or thoughts so far? So I started with 5 lame reasons that people say are not building in security, and it grew to even bigger. So I've pared it down to these 10. There's a lot of lame reasons, and I've been guilty of some of these myself. This is the common one. It's not going to happen to me. I don't know why we think that, even on a personal basis. You know what? My McAfee thing expired. No one's going to steal my stuff. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It will. You will get hacked. I hear this a lot too. When we're trying to suggest we go into coach a team and say, okay, maybe we should think about shifting some of our security testing left, having our developers write secure code, having our QA group using some security testings within each sprint. That's not my job. I didn't sign up to do that. Right? That's another common excuse. And then the thought that, hey, we hired this really expensive security specialist and Ron is going to take care of it. We don't even have to worry about it. He'll make sure we're secure. And then I hear this so much, it just slows us down. We're not able to be agile if we're continuing incorporating security within our sprints. We will not be able to build as many things of value. I hear this a lot from the business side even. They should be freaked out more than anyone about releasing insecure systems. We're too small. You know, the things that make the news tend to be very large companies. Some small companies, we have 20 employees, they're not going to target us. Cyber attacks are getting much easier, and that's why they're more frequent for a variety of reasons. Now, let's suppose what you should take this super genius hacker, and I'm only going to expend so much time and energy focusing on those really high profile, high dollar amount opportunities to attack. Now you can go to the dark web, wherever that is, and providing these organizations apps. You can buy an app, and so you don't even have to code. You can deploy that app. Boom, you've just submitted some ransomware to Jill Stott's computer and demanding $500 in return. So it doesn't really matter. Anyone is at risk, regardless of your size. And then, hey, we don't have sensitive data. We're not like a hospital with that PHI data. We're not a bank that has those credit card information. Any kind of data could be data that you don't want to get into the wrong hands. Could be a competitor. What if one of our competitors to Next Step Solutions decides, if I could hack into their emails, I could figure out how they're operating and steal some of their ideas and maybe even their clients. So no matter what you do have that vulnerability. Again, this kind of goes back to it's too slow. We just don't have time. We don't have time. We're on these tight deadlines. We want to make sure we deliver quickly. And actually, I read this. I can't remember which company it was. Oh, shoot. There's a company where they just said, you know what, there are fines if you, in a lot of cases, if you have a significant security breach. And some companies just say, you know what, it's actually cheaper to pay the fines than go in and rework our entire way of working, hire more experts, provide training. So that's a scary thing to think about. It's just money. You got to go back to maybe it is cheaper, but thinking about it from the other risks, right? Your reputation and so forth. I hear this a lot too. Well, we have our stuff in AWS. We got the cloud, and they're run by Amazon or that one, and they know what they're doing. Or we're using containers. No, if you read the rules about the Amazon web services, each person is responsible for security. It's not guaranteed just because it lives in the cloud. And I don't know why I put lollipops on this one. Oh, I think I was going to have it captioned, "We're not suckers." But I changed the caption. But we just don't have, we don't know how to do it. There are so many classes you can take. They're not that extensive. You can take a 1-year class part-time at the university of wherever and put some of your employees through those trainings and really beef up that knowledge. P.S. This landscape in security from a cyber perspective changes quite a bit every year. So you want to make sure you have somebody continually paying attention to the landscape and making adjustments as necessary. Has anyone heard any of these lame reasons before?
I heard the cloud one Monday.
Oh, really?
Yes, with a client. So yes.
Interesting. Thanks, Brian. All right, who are these bad people? Why are they doing this? I've just been fascinated, like what's in it for them, I guess. So there's kind of 3 general categories. Here's our traditional bad people who want to infiltrate our electronic systems. Again, they want to steal money, right? Illegal profit. Maybe they are corporate espionage, where they also want to take advantage of their business competitors. So now we have, this is an interesting group of people. They call them hacktivists, is one of the terms for this group. Sometimes it's just fun. Let's just see what I can do. A lot of the shows will show like a 14-year-old, oh my gosh, I just got into the NSA, blah, blah, blah. Just to kind of their ego. It's intriguing from, it's a challenge. Also, they may be wanting to push a certain political agenda. So they get in and hack a certain organization in order to make their point. Now we have our nation states, where we have political entities who are actively spending millions and billions of dollars in cyber attacking their, should I say, competitors within the world. Actually, there's 4 of the big actors. You probably have heard of them. You've probably heard of these countries: Russia, China, United States, and North Korea. Right? They're the big players, but it doesn't mean they're the only ones. What's in it for them? They're still in your secrets, man. They're spying on us, doing that espionage. Also, they have that capability to really sabotage some of our federal and our state level systems that could bring this country or other countries to their knees. So this is really important to understand who these actors are. So just a little bit more about the types of cyber attacks. So again, stealing the money, right? These tend to be maybe on a smaller scale, maybe individuals or maybe certain people within a company rather than a whole global effort. The concept of ransomware, that's been really popular. For example, I was reading an article. It's just this woman where she had her computer completely locked out and she had all her pictures of her grandkids, and she had to pay $500 just to get it unlocked. So this is one of those small criminals who probably had that app. And then the bigger consortium, they get a cut for every time you do that. Also, the big ones like the pipeline incident that happened, right? They spent millions of dollars to try to correct all the problems that happened when they had to spend money to pay off that ransom of the pipeline, as well as to retrieve their security and improve their systems. The man in the middle, and I should have known about this a long time ago, but I read about it and I'm guilty of this. So let's suppose you go to McDonald's and they have free Wi-Fi, and maybe it's me because I like McDonald's, and I bring my laptop and I'm going to connect to my VPN at work and do some work while I eat my Big Mac. The risk of doing that anytime you use a public Wi-Fi, be wary, be very wary. It's pretty easy for someone with at least some moderate skills to go in and replicate their Wi-Fi, and then you sign into their fake stuff. And as you're transmitting data, maybe it's even your credit card information, they just pull that away. And then the next thing you know, why do I have a 10,000 charge in Albania on my credit card? Uh-oh, maybe it's McDonald's. And then it remembers, your computer remembers that the wrong one or the fake ones. Each time you go to McDonald's, you can have a pretty strong indication that you're going to get hacked. Over here on the right-hand side, this little category here, I put compromised competitors. So this could be political, it could be business rivals. This first one here is scary, and they deemed it killware. This is literally where I'm using cyber attacks to compromise systems to hurt and kill people physically. You may have heard about the, it's in Florida. It's actually this year, I believe, where it was at their water treatment plant, and the operator was watching his computer screen, and somehow he sees somebody taking over his mouse, and he increases the amount of sodium hydroxide to a lethal amount that is being added to the public water supply. So this could have been like unimaginable how many people would have been affected. Fortunately, the attacker left. I don't know if he left, got out of the system, and he was able to turn it back down. But something so simple could really be hugely damaging, something you want to be aware of. Again, stealing our data and our secrets. So you probably heard about the SolarWare fiasco. So just a teeny bit about this. This was huge, and SolarWare, it's an IT services application. They have 33,000 customers, a lot of Fortune 500 companies, a lot of agencies within the US government. And what happened is, this is quite common as well. Hey, maybe your systems are secure, but we all use different services from other vendors. What happened here is, some entity, they're still not sure what happened, but they found a backdoor into this SolarWinds application. And what they did, they secretly implanted this code in there. And then when they released this update to all of their customers, this little malware then provided the opportunity for these hackers to go in and basically just steal any kind of information they have, things in our federal government, big companies like Microsoft. And it took them over 9 months to even realize they had been hacked. So it affected 18,000 of their customers. And it was really quite clever how they did it. A couple of things I was reading about it, where if you go and you look at the files, sometimes hackers will put in things that are pretty obvious. We don't use that naming convention. They use the same naming convention on the files that SolarWinds did. So that wasn't obvious that something had changed and was different. They also added in delays. So usually you're doing your security testing, right? You do that, then you release your new update. They put this little malware in, they put it to sleep for 2 weeks. So nobody saw any weird activity happening. And then after it got deployed, then it starts kicking in and working, and we don't realize that it came from something we installed 2 weeks ago. So be aware of those third-party tools, the updates that we're getting all the time. Look into that and kind of make a note, particularly if you're an IT person. Hey, we're going to roll out the new Windows 11. What are we going to have in place to validate that there isn't something that got snuck in to steal our data or compromise some of our information that we have on our clients? And then what else would I want to do this to compromise our competitors? Stealing secrets, yes. Hurting people, yes. Just taking them down. You get locked out of your system. It's huge pain, and you can't get your job done. Infect your customers. So yeah, they infected SolarWinds. That was just a small company, but they're actually able to get out to like 18,000 really huge companies through this kind of technique. And then just sabotage, just creating havoc for the havoc's sake. So just a couple of terms I want to talk about to make sure you understand it. So when you're hearing these terms, like, yeah, I know what that means. So 0 day, wasn't that movie called 0 Day something, Brian, the one about Stuxnet?
Something like that. I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, and I was like,
Had zero in the term.
Yes, I know, like, this is 0 day business. So what does it refer to? So it's this broad term that it essentially means, hey, if I have some type of a security breach and the hacker is aware of it, like, oh, I've got a hole in here, but I don't know about it. 0 day refers to, hey, when that happens, dude, you are in big trouble. You have 0 time to mitigate this and eliminate the threat. That's the concept behind it. So there's the 0 day vulnerability. And this is some type of a vulnerability, like I said, that the hackers discover. And they're not just doing it like manually going in and trying to find vulnerabilities. They have bots, they have automated systems that they just turn on, and it scans all these different places for holes in their security. And then we have our 0 day exploits. So one of the baddies finds one of your vulnerabilities, and then they say, okay, now how am I going to exploit this hole in their security? What can I do to benefit me? And we talked about all the things that they could potentially do. And then we take that idea, we actually implement it. We being the hackers, we do that 0 day attack. And like I said, the SolarWinds was undetected for 9 months. And the only reason they found it, there was a company called FireEye, and they were specialized in cybersecurity. They found it in their software. Had they not found it, it probably would still be going on to this day. This is a great website. Love this. They call it OWASP, Open Web Application Security Project. This is a nonprofit organization. If you go to their website, it's just owasp.org. They have tons of free information. They have some tools that you can incorporate in your pipelines. They also publish, I think it's about every year, the top 10 security risks. They just recently came out with their risks for 2021. And here's the top 10. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just some things to think about. Hey, well, what parts are traditionally the biggest problem that I need to address first? Big one, here's our broken access control. Things like elevation of privilege. So maybe I have administrator rights that are just for a certain number of people. Hacker gets into that, suddenly I own your whole system. Having that broken, having that not be secure and tested and validated is the top #1 security risk, according to this OWASP group. Our cryptographic failures. This happens more often than it should because there's so many simple tools to prevent it, where, hey, I want to encrypt those personal data like credit card numbers, PHI. A lot of times something happens in the translation. We think it's encrypted, but maybe if in the database it's not. That's the second leading problem. Injection. You've probably heard of the SQL injection, where I can go in if it's an insecure system and maybe there's this, this entry box. I can type a SQL statement, select everything from such and such. Boom, I've just suddenly stolen 500,000 credit card numbers. Be aware of that. Again, there are simple tools to go in and make sure you have secure code. And just design. You just haven't thought about security from the beginning to the end and where your weaknesses are. And then misconfiguration. So sometimes we send out our applications to people and they don't configure it the way we recommend. There's a vulnerability there, so be aware of that. Are any questions or thoughts? I get excited about this. I'm not talking too fast.
I'm excited.
It's exciting.
I don't know that I can say excited, but I'm definitely eye-opening on a lot of this stuff. I didn't realize the breadth of the stuff that's going on out there. So this is good stuff.
It's exciting is the wrong word. It's probably exciting for the hackers, but it's terrifying, actually. I think maybe that's the word I would use. And the more I learn, it's like, yeah, you can't unlearn it, which I guess that's a good thing. And I was just like, why don't people know about this more? And I think, well, maybe because it's not as sexy or obvious, and it's so hidden behind, it's in another country. There's not a visible character that you know of. All right, so here's it's pretty popular 3-pillar approach to cybersecurity. We've got first is our people, right? We want to make sure we provide our people with adequate training and opportunities to experiment and practice. Hey, what could a vulnerability look like? How do I monitor? How do I set up my systems to alert me when there is a potential breach? Also, establishing that culture of a shared responsibility surrounding security is really vital. We have our processes. right? We have certain procedures we are going to follow. Even if it slows us down a little bit, it'll be worth it in the end. Our best practices, go in and have periodic audits to ensure that each component of your operation is secure. There's not these little secret backdoors with a team that you never interact with. And of course, technology. There are so many amazing automated tools that you can use to ensure your systems are secure. And thinking that we have to do this manually, that's like 20 years ago. We really need to fight these technology breaches with technology. And there's a lot of free sources and then some that are for pay that are really high quality, been around for years. So this is a fun little CIA. What are we protecting, just to kind of keep in mind when it comes to data, right? The stuff, the files that we have on our system. First is our confidentiality, the C. So that's the stuff you have in your systems, in your database and so forth, that these are files and data we only want certain people to be able to see. That's the confidentiality, whatever the reason why. Maybe it's personal identifying information. It could be company secrets. It could be strategic for the military. So you want to ensure that confidential information is kept confidential. Next, we have integrity. So for that data, I want to make sure that it can't be changed or altered in any way either. So some people will go in like, I can't read what's in here, but I'm going to corrupt the file. Ha ha, suckers. Ha ha, suckers. So we want to also ensure that those have integrity and they can withstand any attacks that will come in. Our last one here is availability. So it's similar to integrity. If I have some kind of data and I want to access, I want to be able to access when I need it, right? If someone locks it up and I can't access it at all, that's a problem as well. So think about that as far as data goes: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. All right, so security scanning. You've probably seen different tools that people have used. Here's some things you can implement, or your teams can implement if they haven't already. And the thought is at least do the bare minimum, right? Start with just the simple low-hanging fruit and add these into your development pipeline. Now, maybe you're like, I don't have an automated pipeline. That's okay. You can start doing them manually and it's still not going to take a lot of bandwidth. And then start to build out that DevOps pipeline, right? That's just the steps that you go through. Automate as much of the testing as you can. And then you can start doing that security testing every sprint, every day potentially, with every check-in even. So you know instantly if you have some type of a gap or a hole, you fix it right there. It takes you just a couple of minutes versus, hey, it goes out to the wild. It cost us $4.52 billion or whatever. And then it took us another 6 months to actually fix it. Studies show that on average, when a breach does slip out to market, it takes companies on average 200 days to detect it. That's terrifying. So we want to make sure we detect these puppies in-house, just like all defects. It's a defect, right? So while I'm developing, they have these great tools. They call it static application security testing. It's just a thing that the developer can run. It looks through your code and shows like, oh, here if you got some potential SQL injection, you'll need to rewrite this. Really easy. Peer reviews. Hey, have someone look over your shoulder, see if there's something where I've made a mistake that I have a vulnerability. Oops. Version control, right? When I check it into Git, I want to be sure to have some type of a repository scan and secret management processes and procedures that I follow to make sure nobody has access to the secrets, right? It's invisible to everybody. We just have keys in order to get in. And then I check in my code. Again, I could have this automatically run my static testing to validate, hey, developer dude, you've got some problems here. We're not going to let you add this to the build yet until you fix it, back it back out, and then recommit your code. And then after I do the build here, I have what's called the dynamic application security testing. So now I have an actual application and I can run these diagnostics to see if, hey, when things are actually employed and working together, is there any breaches there? It will let me know quickly if that's happening. Also, my container and cloud security, I can scan those. And then we have our QA. If we have a separate QA group, hey, we want to incorporate security testing, maybe do some penetration testing at this point, some third-party component scans. You're probably using a lot of different tools out there. Let's make sure those are secure, even if you don't own them. I mentioned that the penetration testing, where I'm going to go in and pretend like I'm a hacker, call it ethical hacking, and see if I can think outside the bun and find some potential flaws before we actually send this off to deployment. And then the concept of deploying. Now, compliance is important. So ideally, you put compliance as code, like the infrastructure as code. If you can't do that yet, do it manually, right? Until you can build up that automated suite. And then once it's in your operations, once it's out there in the wild, they have what's called the real-time application self-protection, tools that you can implement that constantly is monitoring for weird things like, oh, there's some extra bandwidth that keeps increasing and we don't know why. It sends me an alert. I investigate it. And it's continually running. So if something happens, once it does escape, or once we do get it out to market, I find it out not in 9 months or 200 days, but immediately. And then again, just as an example of some of the different tools that you could have your staff implement within these different steps of your DevOps pipeline. So just a little bit about penetration testing. So this is all the stuff I just showed you. That's stuff that a lot of times is just very manual and repetitive. And just like automation testing or testing, if it's stuff you do over and over and over again, automate it. And then your super awesome smart people, now they have the bandwidth to go in and do this creative type testing that a machine can't do. So things like external testing, where I'm outside of the company and I'm trying to hack in, and then I have two different teams. They call it the red team and the blue team. I'm going to try to hack in, and then the other team is going to try to counter those attacks. My blind testing, where I have the ethical hacker, that person forgets all this infrastructure inside knowledge that they have and just takes a step back and think, okay, what would outsiders, what information would they have? I'm going to act as if I'm that person and see what vulnerabilities I can find. So this is something that does take time, and I think it's important to build up that skill set. So there's not just one person who can do it, but have a couple of people who get it. I think it's exciting. Your QA people with the right training, most people I know would love to do this kind of stuff, along with their exploratory testing. So I mentioned the concept of threat modeling, and the idea here is I want to take my security specialist and right from the planning step, when we're thinking of a new product to build, or we're trying to think of a new awesome feature to add, and there's just three basic things. Hey, first of all, we make sure we really understand what this application is going to do, what this feature will do, and then determine what potential threats there could be. Hey, when are some potential back roads that people could access our information, and let's rank those threats. And then once we have those mapped out, then before we even build it, we kind of have a roadmap in mind of here's how we're going to ensure this doesn't happen. And then again, think about your countermeasures and mitigations that you would employ with each application and each iteration. There's a question, how does this framework fit from Luke? How does this framework fit into the implementation of commercial off-the-shelf applications? So that's an interesting question. Thank you. So you have, like, even the Windows Chrome had a vulnerability. So how I can't test them specifically, but it's running some of those, the RAST, when it's real time, when they're talking to each other, am I seeing some type of breach? You're looking at if they can infiltrate from your, let's say it's your browser, say it's Chrome, and then actually get to your data. So you have multiple firewalls in between these different third-party tools that you can implement as well. And then just knowing what would it look like from our perspective if one of our off-the-shelf systems was part of our pipeline. I hope that answered your question. Anyone else have some thoughts on it? It's a complicated question, but very important. Sorry, Luke, what were you saying?
Oh, just thank you for addressing that. I work quite a bit with commercial, off-the-shelf packages in terms of implementations. Sometimes they involve a bit of development if there's integrations and that, but I just, in the totality of what you've gone through, which has been very good, kind of where you saw maybe plugging some of this in those situations.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like the whole SolarWinds thing, that you just assume, hey, if it's this package stuff that I'm paying for, it's secure. But having the ability to see, like FireEye did, even though it was coming in through this thing that we upgraded to from a third party, they still had the capability to detect it, whereas none of the other 18,000 organizations did.
The only other thing I was just quickly going to share is a real life example, again, as you've kind of been doing. Here in San Diego, we have several large health systems that combine hospitals, clinics, all kinds of things. Scripps is one of the largest, and I don't know if anybody heard about that, but they were shut down completely, even couldn't answer telephones. And, negotiated a $200 million payment to get things back up and running. But you can imagine how, the impact of a huge health system being controlled in this way. It was a big issue, and just again another example of how important all this is.
That is a great example. That's horrifying. I used to work at United Healthcare, and I was reading in that IBM report that healthcare, at least in this year, and actually the last 10 years, has the largest number of attacks, and they cost more than any other industry within our country. So,
right.
All right. So here's just wrapping this puppy up here. The concept of a DevSecOps engineer. So there's this guy, Chris Rutter, and he works at HSBC, and he has a couple of ideas. How do we actually go about implementing this security? So it's the concept of maybe, hey, I take a person and have that person work as a software developer half the time, and then I have that person do security specializations half the time. So then they understand the code, they understand the features, they're in those conversations, but they also have that breadth of knowledge of security. And then they're working and teaching the developers who don't have this skill set. Hey dudes, I don't have to do it all. Here's what you can do to get secured. Let me help you build out those pipelines and put these little things into place. Again, the idea is this person would be there from the beginning, part of every architectural design, putting their security hat on. And then doing that threat modeling. Like, who does the threat modeling? This person would be a great candidate for that. And building those, just like our architects did, are building reusable libraries for the team. I'm working a little bit ahead, maybe a sprint ahead if you're doing Scrum, so then the team can consume these for the new features they build. And then I love this idea, having that person pair with our testers to write acceptance tests from a security perspective. If we don't officially call them out, it probably won't get done, to be honestly. And a lot of myself, I didn't know how to do security testing. I didn't even know how to contact the security people. If they sat down with me, oh my gosh, we would have been so much better at security, and we would have been able to do it, find our problems faster. And again, working with the BAs to understand, hey, we need security stories, not just a line item in our definition. Don't say, make sure it's secure. That's not actionable, right? We want to have stuff in our backlog that ensures this is being done, as well as maintaining our security. And then again, working with our ops people. So maybe this person has a little sliver of their time also spent with their operations people who are maintaining our systems and understanding what threats might look like, when something's of concern, when something's not, and then really seeing across all those different pieces of our entire pipeline. All right, so we're at the end of our show here. Sorry, that's a lot of talking. What questions or thoughts or any other stories you would like to share before we end?
So I don't know if this is maybe it's a thought and part question. So I'm still continually, I guess I would say, amazed at like the type of vulnerabilities that were around over a decade ago are still here. Like people just haven't learned their lesson. Like developer, right? Like injection. Really? Come on. You know.
Like 20 years ago, I was like, what's SQL injection? Like, that's a good point.
And so I guess my observation, I don't know if it's the same thing as secure, like testing or operations. It's always just seems to be an afterthought, or we're just worried about the new features and going fast. Is it just the same thing? I don't know. I was just curious on your thoughts or others. Like,
I think you hit the nail on the head, and that's where it's culture, right? And that's the hardest thing to change is we're evolved done this way. And there's so many different reasons people say to not do it. But unless they have some champion that has some power to help move the needle in culture, it won't. And they're making billions of dollars, like United Healthcare, right? They just don't seem to see that as a priority. But yeah, I don't know the full answer for that. I think that's a good observation. What else?
I think a lot of this has to do not just with your organization or the enterprise you're working with, but at a personal level as well. Because there's a lot of this stuff that I didn't really realize how, like I said before, how wide this all goes. And you can apply a lot of this to your personal, environment, not just work. So it's good to be vigilant, not just at work, championing that cause and that culture within your organization, but as well within your family. And as an example, I told my wife that via text that I was, watching this and told her, scary. And she's like, scary, how? And I told her, I'm like, so I mean, you need to be constantly vigilant and aware. So I think this drives that home.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jim. And please, 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 if you have older parents, talk to them. This is a personal thing for me. They are targeted more often than any other demographic. They're more trusting. They're not familiar with computers. They get these texts about the IRS, you're in trouble, that the scareware, and they'll call that number. And next thing you know, they're out $300,000 and so much for retirement. It's a real thing. It's a real threat. It's happened to people in my family. So please, thank you. Be ever vigilant with your family as well as your extended family and neighbors. All right, any other questions or thoughts? All right, awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure. I'll sit back another few minutes if you want to chit chat. Otherwise, happy security. No, be secure. We need a better, that's the problem. We need a better motto. We need better advertisement, better promos for cybersecurity. That's the problem. It just doesn't get the attention that the big physical crimes do. All right, I'll think of
It's not much fun, so people don't pay attention to it. You're right. We need better mottos. That would make it more fun. People would pay more